Can you share the ad video, please?
Okay, so I will start with our video
Yes.
and then we can go on.
ConnecTra creates opportunities for people living with disabilities by providing information, resources, and programming geared towards greater inclusion and quality of life. Check out some of the programs we offer through our online learning platform, Connect Together, including our Service Mondays, where we highlight a local organization or initiative, Wednesday Chair Yoga with Bobby Seal-Kobiski, Thursday Adapted Fitness with Megan Williamson, Friday Rotating Dance Classes hosted by Janice Lawrence and Joanne Cuff, and other initiatives including presentations by the Disabled Independent Gardeners Association's Growable program and our Perspective series.
Our next Accessible Community Forum is on accessible education. Be part of the conversation on November 18th from 1 to 3 p.m. as we discuss the current accessible education climate in BC. Register today at accessibleeducationacf.eventbrite.ca.
Check out our updated programs calendar on our website, connectra.org, or find us on Facebook at ConnecTra Society.
All right, thanks, Kaiser. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Perspective series on students with disabilities. Thank you all for joining. My name is Jasmine. I'm the Assistant Program Coordinator here at ConnecTra Society. We have a really exciting session lined up for you today, but I do want to make a couple notes before we start. So the first thing that I'd like to note is that if you require closed captioning, please make sure to enable them on Zoom. And before we begin, I also want to let everyone know that this event is being live streamed to Facebook and YouTube. So please feel free to turn your camera on or off, depending on your comfort level. But that's basically it for the more nitty-gritty stuff. We're excited to have an open dialogue here today. We have few really great community members who will be speaking about their respective experiences on either being a student with a disability or having a child who is a student with a disability. So we're happy to answer your questions and feel free to drop them in the chat or just unmute and ask them yourself. So before we get started on answering all of those questions, I want to introduce our lovely panelists. So our first panelist is Farah Sadek. She is a third-year chemical and biological engineering student at the University of British Columbia and is also the mentorship committee lead at the Disabilities United Committee in UBC. Farah, do you mind talking a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for the introduction. So, like they said, I am currently a student studying at the University of British Columbia, currently studying chemical and biological engineering, and I am proudly an exec member of the Disabilities United Collective, where I am a mentorship committee lead. So far, the work that we have done has been really great, just kind of connecting students, giving them a supportive resource outside of the somewhat bureaucratic system that we have in place at the university that I am grateful for, but can come with challenges. I'm really excited to be here today and to offer any experiences and stories I can tell. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Farah. Our next panelist is Heather Beach, who is the Greater Vancouver Regional Network Coordinator for the Family Support Institute, an organization that supports families living with a disability, and she's been with FSI for 3 years. She also has a teenage son with autism and Prader-Willis syndrome and lives in Vancouver. Heather, do you mind talking a bit more about yourself?
Hi, thanks so much for inviting me. I'm always happy to sort of try and share my own lived experiences and the mistakes I've made along the way to try to, give some people some advice on how to navigate the educational system. And like Jasmine said, I have a teenage son who attends school in the Vancouver School District, and he has learning disabilities. He's on the spectrum, and he also has a rare genetic disorder. And I'm joining you from the stolen, unceded territories of the Coast Salish people. And I'm just really happy to be here and to also hear other people's experiences and some of their wise advice.
Thanks, Heather. And our final panelist for today is Michelle, who is the mother of Joshua, who was born with a rare brain disorder. Joshua is a wheelchair user and currently attends Trinity Western University with the support of the BC Initiative for Inclusive Post-Secondary Education. Michelle, do you mind telling us a bit more about yourself and Joshua, please?
Hi, yes, thank you, first of all, for inviting me to join in. These are important discussions that we have. And I hope that lots of people can participate and benefit so we can learn from each other and support each other. I have a 21-year-old son. He was born, like Heather's son, with a rare genetic condition, and he's unable to speak. He's a wheelchair user, as Jasmine said. He's completely dependent. He requires 24/7 support, yet he's living in the dorm on campus, studying at Trinity Western University. So I would have to say that's probably one of my greatest achievements. And as Heather can attest to, that's no small feat. It has been, it's quite a journey to parent a child with so many needs and navigate the school system, navigate the government bureaucracy that is well-intentioned but can cause plenty of challenge along the way. So anyway, that's a little bit about me.
Thanks, Michelle. Thank you, everyone, for introducing yourself. We're all super excited to have you here today. One of the first questions that I'd like to ask you is just what kind of difficulties did you run into when advocating for your needs or your child's needs when interacting with school administration or accessibility services?
I can go first, just speaking as a student with a disability. So the disability that I live with is called achromatopsia. So I have a visual impairment and I'm legally blind. This means that I have, I'm like fully colorblind, so I can't see anything like just in shades of gray, like any colors just in shades of gray, sorry. And additionally, like I have around 20/200 vision, if you understand the medical side of it. So that just means what you can, like an average person can see from 200 feet away, I need to be 20 feet, like to be able to see that same thing. Additionally, I have bad depth perception and peripheral vision. So overall, this is just to kind of give context to maybe some of the struggles I meet. And I think as best as a lot of high schools try, the hardest part for me when going into university was kind of navigating how to advocate for myself in a way that would get me results. Because after high school, when I was going into university, I was trying to join the Center for Accessibility that we have on campus, and they have a lot of great resources. They have a lot of great people working for them, but they are overextended to the point where especially in my first semester, I didn't get any counseling or advice or anything until like it was almost like 2/3 into my first semester. So I was struggling so much because I didn't have any of the accommodations I needed, and I didn't have any proof that I had like that I had a legitimate disability that I could give to my professors. So I was kind of at the mercy of my professors to get my accommodations, and sometimes I wouldn't get those accommodations just because they felt the need to go through the school center for accessibility to get me those accommodations. So it caused me a lot of incredible stress, and just I was overextended as a student. So it impacted my mental health a lot because this was an entirely new environment for me. And coming from high school where I was a very successful student, to an environment where I was just struggling and I couldn't keep up with my classmates, it just felt overwhelming, and it definitely impacted my self-esteem. So I think overall, just like in terms of advocating for myself, like the biggest hurdle was just kind of navigating the system that is like so overextended and isn't properly, given like the funding and people it needs, just so that it can help me be successful in the environment. If I know I rambled on a bit, if there's any clarification, please let me know.
Farah, can I ask you, like, would a lot of the grief that you went through, would that have been mitigated had you had just a simple sort of onboarding session or workshop on here's how, as a student with disabilities, to navigate university at UBC or whatever post-secondary institution? Like if you had some coaching, counseling, training on here's how to set yourself up for success even before you started school, would that have been a huge help for you?
I think in some ways, yes, because I went to high school in Alberta, so I can't speak on anything in BC, but I was given an accessibility counselor, and they were really great. They, helped me find, they helped me kind of advocate for myself in high school. But I think because they were limited to high school, they didn't know how to tell me how to advocate for myself in university. So I thought it was going to be similar to high school, where I would just kind of talk to my professors and be like, these are my needs. I'm a student with a disability, and it would just kind of be really smooth. So I think if I had like a few months before been told, you need to sign up with this organization, you need to meet with these people, and you need to do it early on before they get overloaded with people, I think that would definitely have saved me a lot of like grief and stress.
Oh, yeah. So can I just to clarify, so you had an accessibility counselor in high school, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And so but that person,
sorry, go ahead.
That person wasn't trained to set you up for university.
I mean, to my knowledge, I believe they were somewhat trained in terms of what they told me was more on, these are like some interesting scholarships you could look at. Or, like when you go to university, use your cane more so that way people can identify you as someone with a disability. but I don't think they were trained, or if they were trained, I don't think they were trained well enough in terms of like navigating a lot of like the institutional paperwork and a lot of the institutional things I'd have to face. In some ways, I understand because different institutions are obviously different, but I think it's something I really wish I had to kind of know so that I knew that, oh, I didn't just email my professors. I didn't just give them like a brochure or something showing that, you know, these are my needs and this is my disability. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that transition process is a real tricky part for at either end of the educational spectrum, transitioning into kindergarten, transitioning into high school, transitioning out of high school. You know, there's not like a seamless, or it doesn't feel like it's a seamless process. And I know that, you know, there's workshops for those younger years, but I think particularly going into university, there's a lot of assumptions made that, oh, well, if you're attending university, then, you know, you probably are, quote, very high functioning, right? And it's not set up for folks that need some extra supports and just that knowledge, right? Like they're telling you like, oh, well, here's a couple of tips, but you know, that only goes so far, right? You almost need someone to sort of really guide you through the process and orientate a person when you're going into a different school or a different setting. And I know, like for me, so my son's 16, and we're looking, you know, on that horizon of, you know, transitioning, and you only know what you know, right? Because there's so much to know, right? You can't, like, you know, it's too much overload to look too far ahead because you're just trying to survive the day to day. So trying to, you know, get a little bit of information beforehand, so when that time comes, you feel a little bit more prepared. And there are organizations that offer some transitioning workshops, including FSI. But yeah, that it's tricky, and I think that's when you feel really anxious, you know, about what's coming next and how to navigate that.
Yeah, like I definitely agree. And I think thankfully I'm fortunate enough that I'm able, like I have somewhat of a visual disability, like you can somewhat see it when I use my cane or when I'm like constantly squinting. So people can somewhat tell and they take my disability seriously. And that includes like the institutions as well that we have in place. It's because with diagnosing as well, I can't speak on behalf of those with like learning or mental disabilities or who are neurodivergent, but from the people that I've listened to, they say, you know, it's really difficult to get a diagnosis, and without that diagnosis, you can't get the supports in place. So I was at least fortunate enough to have like a diagnosis, or I guess like just a doctor's note for me that was like up to date enough that they could use. But I'm guessing like for a lot of people who aren't in a similar situation as I, like that's maybe another hurdle they have to go through in terms of advocating them for themselves, just going through like the institutions without being able to like showcase proof with a diagnosis.
You mentioned talking to other students with different disabilities. I'm interested because you're a part of the Disabilities United Collective. How has being part of the collective supported you or affected the way that you navigate your experience in university?
I'm pretty new with the collective, but I think I am really grateful for it because I hear a lot of stories that like are unbelievable, and I think it has definitely changed how I think about spaces. So currently I'm on a co-op placement, so I haven't been on campus for the past 8 months, but I think back because I do my labs and I go into these spaces and I'm like, wow, a lot of these spaces aren't accessible to so many people. Like if you're a wheelchair user, um, I don't know how you could navigate a lot of the spaces like the lab, because sometimes it can be left cluttered. Sometimes things are just really like on high up shelves. And it just, like, I don't know, I think being part of the collective has helped kind of change the way I think about different spaces and different ways that professors teach or TAs teach, and as well as like just the different spaces that we have on campus and how they might affect students that have different disabilities than I do.
Thank you for that. I think, yeah, especially just considering, I feel like STEM as a field. I've talked to several other students with disabilities at UBC for my other job at the campus newspaper, and they've talked a bit about how inaccessible the spaces at UBC can be, especially for wheelchair users. Another thing that I want to ask everyone is, we've talked a lot about the difficulties that everyone has had navigating the system, but what were the most helpful resources that you accessed that made either navigating your own educational experience or your child's educational experience more accessible and just easier?
Well, I think, actually, so Jasmine, to answer your earlier question, what are the challenges faced? Now having gone through elementary school, high school, and now into university, I would say as Heather mentioned, the transitions are really tough, from the umbrella of the Center for Ability, that if you're in the system well, then that's a really great support. I think one of the biggest, at least here in Vancouver, and I'm careful, but yet not too careful, to speak quite critically of the Vancouver School District, because they had a very narrow path for my son that was really not good for him, and there was a lot of pressure to follow that path, especially in high school, and there was not a lot of equipping in the earlier years for actual education. My son was very much segregated and pulled out and taken away from his peers. And he's very social, very much needs to be a part of, a diverse social peer group. And so I needed, there's a few angels that come along the way in your life. And I met someone actually at the University of Victoria. He is the coordinator of the Provincial Inclusion Outreach program. And he really shared a vision of inclusive education, like truly inclusive education. And he put me onto some TED Talks by a photojournalist in the States named Dan Habib, which I highly recommend. If you look up Dan Habib, Habib, he really, really is a huge advocate of inclusion, inclusive education, because it just sets up the individual, the child with disability, to become an adult with disability. And anyway, it's a whole other topic, maybe for another day, but the challenge for me and for my son navigating the system, and we're talking about the educational system right now, it was, it's just to be segregated, pulled out, and not really respected as a learner or a student, and then given the tools necessary. So yeah, in grade 8, when Josh transitioned to the public high school, I had to fight for him. They wanted to put him in a high school with none of his peers. Nobody knew him. Now here, this is a nonverbal student, highly social, needs his friends, needs some people that know him. And they want to put him in a high school that nobody knows him, nothing. And then they want to put him in a life skills program that basically has the lowest functioning kids in the whole, district, all put into this classroom. And so I had to fight, first of all, to get him to go to the feeder high school, into another life skills program, which I succeeded in doing after much grief and effort and advocating and meetings. And but that also turned into a terrible situation. And to the point where 3 months in, my son is violent every morning, he just so refusing, wanting to go to school. He was diagnosed in January by a psychiatrist as clinically depressed. This is not my son. And I ended up having to go to a private high school for grades 9 to 12, and then that additional year, just for his sanity and for mine. So there was some real challenges that we came up against with, following the path that the school district wanted to lay out.
Well, and I totally agree with what you're saying, Michelle. I've had kind of a similar experience because we were also in the Vancouver School District. So when you talked about like finding your angels, that's one of the things that I found that was helpful, like finding your allies, right? Find your allies in the school. And that can be sometimes other parents, other kids. I've had other parents come to me and say, hey, I witnessed something between your son and his aide that made me really uncomfortable, that I had no idea that was going on, right? Because the school's not going to tell me. They're going to try and handle it internally. And I was like, oh, I had no idea. So, finding those allies for your family and for your child, right? Trying to build those relationships. Sometimes the allies can be like the librarian, right? Or like the maybe volunteer parents who do like a school lunch program. Maybe you've got a teacher that you worked really well with, and then the next year you've got a teacher, so you can, use those old relationships to, build on that, and to, they will, in whatever way they can, help advocate for your child. And, and the thing is, like, I know when we get asked a lot, like, okay, my child's going into school, we live in this area, what would be the best school for my child to attend? So trying to get out of catchment is quite difficult, number one. But two, like the perfect school, it doesn't exist usually, because it changes, the principals change, and of course the teachers change most every year. So it's really hard for parents to feel like they're making a good decision, and you don't know until you're in it, right? Like Michelle, you worked so hard to get your child on the catchment school, and it was a disaster, right? 3 months later, you had a kid who went from loving school to refusing to go, so you have to kind of know, like, maybe this isn't working, and think of ways that you might have to drastically change to make it work for your child. Because for our kids who have disabilities, like, school can be great or it can be traumatizing, and they have enough struggles and traumatizing experiences to go through. Like, let's not add on some school issues with that. So just building relationships, attending a PAC meeting if you can, finding the people that are there and have that inclusion vision for your child. And then looking at outside people, outside agencies. Inclusion BC has a wonderful handbook on inclusion in the schools, and it's like a Bible. Honestly, it's a really great resource to have for parents. Attending those meetings with another person, like if you're going into an IEP, bring someone with you. Don't go in there alone, right? And that's something that I wish I had done before, because I thought, oh, I can do this. I got this figured out. I can You know, it would have been really helpful to have someone in a meeting with me, even just to take notes. Not necessarily, I mean, yeah, you can have someone there that sort of, you know, your advocate and will help speak up, but sometimes it's just having someone on your side of the table, someone taking notes, because when I'm in those meetings, I'm like really overwhelmed and emotional and deer in the headlights, and I have no idea what's going on, and I can't even remember half the things that happened in that meeting, right? So having a person to be there to fill in those gaps and to just make you feel a little bit more confident is, I think, is helpful. And that can be in the school, that can be anywhere, right? Medical appointments, any of that. Like I try to bring people that I trust and know. And FSI, Family Support Institute, is an agency that can match you with another parent to attend a meeting with you. And especially now with all that stuff happening on Zoom, it's a lot easier. So that's a few of my tips and tricks that I've learned along the way.
I just want to reiterate what you said, Heather. I think that's brilliant advice, is to get allies from teachers, librarians, parents. And here's an example of that. One of my friends, who was a fellow mom, and her middle daughter was in the same grade as Josh. I found out from her son, who was 2 years younger. He comes home from school one day and he says, "Why is Josh taking out the recycling every day?" And then I was like, what? So I find out, he's really on janitor duty every single day. And I'm like, I'm sorry, my son is not there to, like, yes, all kids should have their, their classroom chores or whatever it's called. But, I find out that this is what Josh is doing every single day. And so it's things like you have no idea, and which is very unsettling.
So it doesn't build trust. That's for sure.
Yeah,
it doesn't build trust when you hear of these things secondhand, and you're like, why did no one tell me that my child was coloring in a coloring book while everybody else was, studying, the history of Quebec or something,
Right, exactly. Because they just, and a part of it is it's easy to point fingers, and I think what we're here to do is to build bridges and find, because it's a challenge for the school system, because now I have to say it's not just a resource issue, because Josh went from public school to private school where they had less resources, because it was a Christian private school. It was not a wealthy, they've got all the money. So they had less resources, but way better results, because they had a mindset and a heart that says, you matter, and we're going to do everything we can and figure out and be creative in how to teach you. Whereas, the public system, they had many more resources. So it's not just a resources issue, but I think it is a training issue. And that goes back to being a university student learning to become a teacher. Teachers are now, they're forced to have an inclusive classroom, but they're not equipped and trained to have an inclusive classroom. I have a friend.
I believe they have they do maybe one block. I could be wrong, but the knowledge of, and I think sometimes I've known people who become teachers, I think in their mind they think, oh, well, other people teach those kids, right? I'm not going to have kids like that in my classroom.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would like to just reiterate another thing that Heather said. It's relationship building. That is your greatest ally. And learning to reach out to people, learning to, create it's not a formal thing, right? But it's just it's having relationships and letting it's how life works the best. We know that, right? Social science is letting us know that the happiest, healthiest, longest living people are the ones that have lots of relationships and quality relationships. And so how to facilitate that, and just to think about, and first of all, it's just being mindful of it, how important it is to develop relationships. And it doesn't mean you have to be best friends with everybody, but it's just a community of care that we look out for each other and we pay attention to what's going on around us, to point out what's good, but also what maybe needs some correction.
Yeah, because if you find yourself in a situation that isn't okay with you, if you've tried to establish a good relationship with the teacher, then they're going to be more receptive to hearing that, and to hearing, oh, that's right. Like, I didn't really think how that would affect, your son. And, I think no one goes, like, teachers go into teaching, it's not for the money, right? Because they love kids. They love teaching. They love, having relationships with children and their parents, and so it's just over time, because it feels so under-resourced, that, they can sometimes, get a little hardened and say, listen, I'm doing as much as I can in this classroom. Like, I'm up to here. I've got, 28 kids, and 3 of them have designations, and 4 of them need a designation, and 5 of them got, who knows, right? So, it's stressful, and it's difficult for them. So anything that you can do to help them understand how your child learns, how, what sort of things are triggers for them, whether it's behavior or social, giving them as many tools that you have in your pocket about your child can be helpful. And building those relationships, because you'll need to fall back on them, because there will be tough times. And so having those good relationships, and it might not be with the teacher, right? It might be with the resource teacher instead, or it might be with the principal, and just kind of understanding that sometimes you have to be diplomatic, sometimes you got to bite your tongue, like, that's just because you're in this kind of messy system. So
thank you both for sharing those experiences. Sarah, I'm interested in learning more about how that kind of relationship building and finding allies is like for you as a student with a disability advocating for yourself, and how the transition might have been if in high school and elementary you might have had your parents who were helping you advocate, but now in university it might be more your responsibility with a bit less support than you might be used to. How has that been like for you?
Yeah, sure. So I think it was definitely interesting. I love my parents, and I hear like how they advocate for me, and how Heather and sorry, I'm just trying to read all the names. Heather and Michelle both like advocate for their kids, because like, especially my mother, like my mother was like always my greatest advocate. Like, she always believed in me, because like she knew my level of capabilities. Like, not to say that she never made any mistakes, but like one thing I loved about her was how she always believed that I was like really capable, and that she hated how especially in elementary school, she would talk about how a lot of the administrators or people within the school system would try to kind of pull me out of the, I guess, the what you'd consider like the AP section, so like advanced placement. My mother has always believed in me to be really intelligent, and she loved playing math games and doing things with me. And I think when she saw how in elementary school, especially, I was kind of underestimated a lot, and she was afraid that that would kind of teach me to like just underestimate myself. She really fought hard, and when I mean hard, like she is like bilingual right now, but initially like her English was not very strong, so she advocated for me to like the greatest degree that she could. And I think, yeah, like, she definitely saved me from kind of treating myself, especially in like elementary and middle school, treating myself as if I was like lesser than other students, because like, you know, she really saw and believed in me, and I see that in Michelle and Heather and how they really like believe in their kids. So I'm really glad to hear from them. But I guess speaking in university, I think definitely like my parents were going through a difficult time at the when I was entering university, so I didn't feel as comfortable just like reaching out to them for help. So a lot of it was just me making doctor's appointments, doing things so I can prove my disability and show it. And that's not to say that they were neglectful at all. They set me up as best as they could. They just were going through a really difficult time. So when I go into university, I think definitely, as weird as this is going to sound, it's like in engineering and maybe just joining university in general, because I joined, my first year was like completely virtual. I was in like, it was the pandemic. So there was like a very tight niche within all the like engineering students, and I was able to make like a few friends, but just even not even people that I was friends with. I would just need to explain my disability, being like, hey, I cannot like see the color of these different resistors or something. Can you please tell me what's going on? And they would like immediately. So I think just, I don't want to say that about all students that I encountered. There were some that were just like, huh? What do you mean? What do you mean you can't see this? You know what I mean? But a lot of the times, a lot of the students that I had and were friends with, like they were so like ready to like give me notes that I wasn't able to see or able to finish writing. They were so ready to help me see colors and help me with like seeing if my code resulted in the right outcome, or hypothetically just anything from our labs. I think, yeah, like just thinking about how grateful I am to the friends that I had and still do have, who like are like endlessly like willing to help me when I'm like struggling because of my vision. And then I guess in terms of speaking additionally about like professors, of course there were a few professors who were just not having it. They weren't listening to the fact that I'm a student with a disability, and I just couldn't, and I don't have my appointment yet with the CFA. But there were many that were just really willing to be like, hey, I can't give you all these accommodations, but I can give you these. So will that work? And like, you know, they really tried their best. And I think that was amazing to just see that even though I was like panicking and constantly under this stress, that I kind of had these people as lifeboats in a sense. Like I didn't necessarily rely on them. I tried never to rely on them, but like in times of struggle, like it was definitely nice to have. So I can't speak about peers for Michelle and Heather for their kids, but for me, like the peers that I've made, like and friendships I've made, have like definitely been able to help me like throughout just like navigating university overall.
Well, I have to say, Farah, kudos to you. Bravo, girl. You've overcome a lot. And I really, really admire you and your mother. Well done. And you know what it just inspires in me listening to you is, again, the beauty of inclusion, because your peers that are helping you, they're becoming better humans because they're being made aware that there's some things that are really hard for a person with a disability, whatever that disability is, and to be more sensitive to other people around you and the needs that they might have. That's a gift. We don't think of that very often, but I'm learning that with Josh because my son has so many needs. He needs help to do everything. So, and at first it took me a long time to get to that place where I understood that he's as much of a blessing to everybody else as the ones that are helping him, supporting him, being a friend to him, as that's a blessing to him and to me. But it just makes for a better community when we're more considerate and more aware of, we got to help each other out. Life is tough for all of us.
Yes, Pat, did you have a
Yeah.
question?
Hi, yes, I did have a question for everyone. My background is in employment counseling for people with disabilities, and I'm just curious about how much support there is for students towards eventual employment after education. And I know that you talked about how some people are very limited in what they're able to do. So maybe employment hasn't been part of the process or planning, but I'm just I'm hearing this about students in general, kind of feeling like the connection between post-secondary education and employment is not great, and they sometimes leave not really sure what their employment options are, or not feeling prepared in terms of their skill set and what employers are looking for. So I'll just mute myself and listen, but just wanted to add employment to the conversation. Thanks very much.
There's the next terrifying transition.
Yeah, well, in my son's school, he's in grade 11, and they've started a employment placement type situation, and it's going to be a long journey. I mean, they're talking about readiness and things that you need to how you need to present yourself and how you need the expectations of an employer, and then he will eventually get like a placement. I think it's next year, the senior year, that he does like a practicum of some kind. It can be a struggle to find the right situation because they kind of have a limited amount of things, and he can't do anything that is food related. So many of those placements are fast food, those types of things, and there are organizations that provide some of that. And I think I'm in that learning curve where I'm like, okay, it's probably not going to take the first time. It's probably going to be a few, let's go through these programs a few times before he has readiness for that. But yeah, for sure, it's an issue because people want to contribute to life. People want to be out there and doing things that are that they have interest in and that their abilities can shine. So it's trying to, I think, find the right match, as Pat, and finding the employers that will have that the room and the space and the heart to take on some of our kids.
Yeah, and I think just to add to what Michelle and Heather were saying, because I am like currently in co-op placement, so I did somewhat go through like the job seeking process with some like university experience. Sorry, I'm recovering from a flu. But I think for me personally, like just speaking for myself, the biggest hurdles I face is just kind of this fear of one, kind of not being able to get the technical skills I need, like at the same rate or be as good as my peers in those technical skills to compete with them for jobs. And I think additionally is because I'm fortunate enough that if I want to, I can hide my disability. So I'm afraid of like, should I disclose my disability or not? Because on the one hand, it's like I meet companies that aren't going to be willing to accommodate for me if I disclose my disability. But then on the other hand, I might end up like shutting away like opportunities because someone might make assumptions about like what I'm capable of and not be willing to just ask me about it. So I'm kind of especially like looking into these more technical fields and more technical jobs. Like that's my biggest fear, just kind of choosing whether or not to disclose my disability and then have that come back to me in some sort of consequence, either of like not getting the job because of it and I don't know that, or getting the job but then being with a company that's not willing or able to give me the accommodations I need.
Yeah. There's some great resources that I'd love to share, Farah. There's a wonderful leadership program with WinSet. I'm just going to put it in the chat. And this isn't specifically for people with disabilities, but it's really a great resource for women in science, engineering, trades, and technology that sometimes face some of the things that you're talking about because women sometimes aren't often in as large a numbers as we would like to be represented in non-traditional occupations. So that leadership program is a really great overview of how to advocate for yourself and focus on communication skills, problem solving, something we talked about, allyship, really big for women in non-traditional occupations too. So I would encourage you to reach out to them. They're really terrific. And then the other thing is the Essential Skills program. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with what's going on there, but it's been developed through the Government of Canada. Again, I'll put the link in there for you. Hopefully that's the right one. Let me just double check on that. And it really focuses on the essential skills that are required for different occupations. That's a better link right there. And there's some great videos that break down the 9 essential skills so that you can kind of get a sense of what they're about. And this is after doing lots of research with employers to find out what are the essential skills that they're looking for in employees. And it's different for every job. So they have broken down the different occupations with not just the essential skills, but what level you require in all of them. But, it's something sometimes our schools have gotten a little bit far away from. They focus on the academics, but they sometimes lose sight of what the employers are really looking for. And these are all teachable. They're all things that, skills that people can develop. But I think especially for people with disabilities, the more that they can focus employers on the skills and not the disability to sort of shift the emphasis, I guess, there's likely to be less discrimination. So, it's another way of kind of approaching it, something tangible.
Pat, what was your question again?
The question was whether schools are actually making that connection for students with disabilities to employment and whether or not they're doing enough. So as an example, those essential skills, is that being discussed? Is it coming up? How are they addressing soft skills, for example, communication skills, working in a team, collaborating with others, because these are all things that employers are looking for.
Right. I would say the answer is no.
Okay, and that's not good.
No, it's not. Have you heard of the BC Initiative for Inclusive Post-Secondary Education Step Forward program?
Yeah, sounds good.
So so that's like Joshua is supported at Trinity Western University by the BC Initiative for Inclusive. I should put it up in the chat.
Yeah.
But what, you know, they had a summit at the beginning of the school year. So they support students that have like the highest designation to go on to a post-secondary education, even though they don't qualify academically. Like Josh is still learning to read and write, but he's at university taking university courses, and he's with peers. And so he's technically auditing classes.
Great.
But he's developing an identity that says, I belong. I'm a student. I'm a, quote, normal young man, just like everybody else. And that took a little while for him to get that identity, but he's got it now. And that is so exciting for me. But they had a summit on inclusive post-secondary education at the beginning of the school year, and there's some academics from across Canada that presented, and it was I was only able to attend a little bit, so I didn't get very much, but they're talking about the resource. Sorry, I don't know. Excuse me. They're talking about. There's enough research to indicate that students with disabilities, and especially like the more severe disabilities, you know, they're without opportunities to continue to make create genuine relationships with their peers, and to have continued training, education, in whatever field that interests them. Their quality of life outcomes are very poor, extremely poor. They're isolated, they're lonely, it's not good. But those that do have the opportunity to continue to learn and grow, they have employment opportunities, and their quality of life is significantly improved. And so that's one of the big pushes behind inclusive post-secondary education. And so anyway, that they're addressing that and looking, and they're wanting that transition from once the educational years are over, to go into the workforce and to have it be a much more successful experience.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. I think education is really important. There's another organization called CASE, Canadian Association of Supported Employment. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they've got some excellent programs too. And their mentorability program, I think, is really terrific. It started out basically as a conversation between employers and people who are looking for job opportunities in certain fields. So it kind of gives them an opportunity to ask questions, build relationships, and hopefully lead to employment as well. So CASE is Canada-wide. They've done some really amazing stuff. So yeah, that's a great way to start to find out about local opportunities for supported employment. And just for people that don't know, so the supported employment model is based on paid employment. Often there's a job coach who works alongside the person to give them the skills that they need to be successful, and that's phased out as the person becomes more competent and independent in their functioning. So lots of great programs around British Columbia and the Lower Mainland based on that supported employment model.
Great.
Thank you for sharing that, Pat, and thank you everyone for sharing and talking about steps forward. Michelle, we actually have a former presentation that they did for us. So if you check our Facebook or YouTube channel, you'd also be able to learn more about that. It is one, so our session for today needs to wrap up. But thank you so much, Michelle, Heather, Sarah, and Pat, just for sharing your experiences and being so honest and vulnerable about the struggles you face, but also giving advice and sharing resources. Thank you for your time here today. And if any of you have any questions, or if anyone watching has any further questions or would like to connect with the panelists, please email Emily, our program coordinator, at echambers@connectra.org. I've dropped her email address in the chat but I'll drop it again. And if you would like to watch back this video, we will have it be posted on Facebook and YouTube. And I've included the Facebook and YouTube links in the chat as well. But that is basically it for today's session. Thank you again all for coming, and I hope all of you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks for the invite.